Fairy Dirt by Thomley. Chapter 6. As the dawn's early light began to peek through her bedroom window, Brynn woke up. She hoped that Max had made it home safely before the sun started to rise. It would be convenient for him that his room was already in the basement. That would surely be the safest place for him to sleep in his house. The hardest part would be avoiding his parents. How do you explain to your parents that you are a vampire now? Hey, Mom and Dad, the fables are true. I survive on blood now. Oh, and my girlfriend is a fairy. No way. She dressed quickly in jeans and an old tank top and grabbed an apple and granola bar from the kitchen on her way out of the house. She headed straight to the library. There would be other fairies there studying today, so she would have to be careful not to attract much attention to herself. The last thing that she needed was prying eyes. She didn't know where to even start looking, but Fiona's cryptic message told her that there was definitely something to be found. She cast a quick clarity spell on herself once she was in the library. She hoped that the extra focus would help her with the task at hand. May I think clearly and remain steadfast. She thought silently. She stood before a wall of books and closed her eyes to concentrate. What kind of book would a spell like this even be in? She asked herself as she brushed her hand over the books in front of her. She closed her eyes and let her fingers linger on each binding. Some of them felt so dusty. They must not have been read in quite a while. There was so much history on the shelves. When she opened her eyes, her hand was resting on a book of healing. Taking it as a potential sign from above, she grabbed the book and headed for a chair. Vampires were supposedly damned, so Max did have the potential to need to be healed. That made sense, right? Just as Brynn was of angelic descent, Max was now of demonic descent. That was why the sunlight burned him. He was too impure to be in the presence of the light. Brynn scoured the book for what must have been hours. There were so many pages. She was being so careful not to miss anything that could be useful, so it took a while to go from page to page. She had officially learned how to heal every type of human, mystica, and fairy ailment that existed, but nothing for vampires. There were only 10 pages left to read, and she wanted to scream out loud in frustration. This felt impossible. She took a deep breath and turned the last few pages. There was nothing there that could help her. She angrily pushed her chair out and stood up. She had spent so long looking through this book. It seemed right, but it was all for nothing. Her exaggerated movement caused her to knock the book onto the floor. She blushed, realizing that she had drawn attention to herself. She hated doing that. As she picked the book up to put it back on the shelf, a single page fluttered down to the ground. Leave it to me to damage a damn spell book. She muttered as she bent down to grab the stray page. Something about the paper grabbed her attention. It seemed to be of a heavier stock than the other pages in the book. It was a slightly different color as well, almost unnoticeable to the naked eye. She glanced at it as she was sliding it back inside with the other pages. Nigerimus Die was written at the top of the page. It was an old handwritten spell. She knew from other spells she had cast that it roughly translated to the darkest day in Latin. There was no explanation as to what the spell was for or how it worked. This had to be what she was looking for. Her gut told her that it was. She folded the sheet in half and stuck it in her pocket, quickly glancing around to make sure no one saw her take it. She sent Max a quick message to say that she was on her way to his house, and she headed out. He agreed to meet her at the park at nightfall, but this couldn't wait. The day was fairly overcast, and it seemed like a perfect time to try out the spell. She would cast it inside of the house just to be safe. He wouldn't have to go far to find out if it worked or not. If it wasn't a success, he would probably have some minor burns, but nothing that wouldn't heal in a matter of minutes. Thank God for that rapid vampire healing. Hopefully, it wouldn't come to that. She was surprised that he was awake when she got to his house, but he must have been excited at the possibility of getting back to a semi-normal life. Who could blame him? Are you ready to try this? She asked as she walked into the basement.
More than you can imagine, babe.
He said as he gave her a hug. His arms lingered around her. He was in this because of her, but she still felt like safety. Relief surged through him at the mere sight of her. He knew that she would find a way to help him. It was weird to hug him now. He was the same Max that she had hugged before, but now he was cold and somewhat intimidating. You know I'm not great at spells, so please don't be mad if I don't get it right at first. I'm not even positive that I found the right thing. I have been getting better at spells lately, though. You should have seen me casting after school yesterday. My mom even came outside and pumped me up about it. That was a first, she said as she closed her eyes and tried to steady her breathing. This was the most nervous she had ever been about casting a spell. There was so much riding on this. She had studied the spell the entire way to his house, so she quickly recited it as she had done about 100 times already.
Aren't you going to say something?
Max asked, seeming a bit bewildered as to why Brynn was just standing there with her eyes closed. No. Brynn laughed as she opened her eyes. You don't have to say the spells out loud. I'm not a witch or anything. Trust me. We only say them out loud when we are learning them for the first time. I said it out loud the whole way here. Now walk upstairs and see what happens. Max gave her a look of extreme speculation as he headed toward the staircase. She was too nervous to watch what happened. She just closed her eyes and waited. She took it from the scream that ensued, and the subsequent string of obscenities that followed, that her spell had not worked. I'm so sorry, she cried out as she saw him walk back down the stairs. His face was burned and bleeding much worse than she thought that it would be. This was not a minor burn. Skin was hanging off.
It's okay, Brynn. It will heal. Just don't start crying again.
He joked as he took a seat on the edge of the bed. Thank God his parents had gone away for the weekend. There would be no way to put an innocent spin on what was happening right now. It looked like a scene straight out of a horror movie. I don't know how well you will heal. You haven't fed much, have you?
To be honest, I don't even really know what I'm doing. I get nervous.
He looked away. He felt like the worst vampire to ever have existed. Pathetic. He was embarrassed that he had no idea what to do. The man that made him a vampire told him nothing about his new life. He managed to suck down a few small animals on his way home from the park the night before. But that was it. He didn't ask for this life, and he didn't even know how to live it properly. He felt worthless. Well, why don't you just have a little bit of my blood? You need to eat, or you won't heal, and I am not done trying out this spell. Plus, I learned when I was young that vamps can draw powers from those that they feed on. I hate that term. Maybe it will help, though. Brynn realized how irrational it sounded before she was even done speaking, but he needed to eat.
No way. I am not doing that to you. I will heal. We will just have to wait a little while. I am not poking holes in you and draining your blood in addition to everything else that has been going on.
I know it sounds crazy. Max and I know it might be weird. I promise it will help. I wouldn't suggest it if I thought there was another way. What if it takes the rest of the day for you to heal? If we run out of sunlight, we are done trying this. We don't have any other options. Trust me, the thought of someone drinking my blood doesn't get me all giddy. It's weird for me, too.
What if I can't top once I start? It's dangerous, Brynn. I might not know what I am doing or how any of this works, but I know enough to know how much I could hurt you.
You will be able to stop yourself. When you kissed me last night, you resisted any urge you might have had. It turned out fine. You're strong, and I know you won't hurt me.
That's easy for you to say. You don't know how it felt when I kissed you. It was powerful, almost more powerful than me.
He knew that Brynn was right. He hated it. It was a dangerous plan, but he needed to feed. He could feel himself getting weaker as he sat there rather than healing. She walked over to the bed and sat beside him. He really did feel like this was crossing a line. But what choice did he have? She was so beautiful. If she only knew what he saw when he looked at her. He brushed the hair away from her neck as she closed her eyes. He could see, hear, and feel the pulse in her neck. It was beating so rapidly. He knew that she was nervous. He had never felt so much desire in his life. It was like the blood was calling out to him. But it wasn't just any blood, it was hers. He felt Brynn take a deep breath when she heard his fangs come out. The second his teeth pierced her skin, his mouth was full of blood. It flowed down his throat like hot chocolate would have when he was still a human. It seemed to hurt Brynn only for a second, and then she was completely relaxed. His cold hands held her gently until he was finished. When he was done, he pierced the tip of his finger with his fang and ran some of his own blood over the bite marks. The wounds disappeared instantly. He didn't know how he knew to do that. It must have been some new vampire instinct. If he could absorb her powers, maybe she could use his. It seemed to work. "How do you feel now?" Brynn asked him, smiling as she watched his face heal until it was perfect once again. She felt a bit woozy but was happy to see him healing.
It was a satisfaction that I have never felt before. And at the risk of sounding disgusting, your blood tastes great.
They shared a laugh, and he tucked her hair behind her ear. Tasting her blood made him want her even more. It was distracting. "That's good because I want to try this one more time." He rolled his eyes and grinned at her, fangs still out. She felt like a weirdo for thinking it, but he looked so hot in that moment. She grabbed his hand, and they both stood up.
That hurt like hell last time. Shouldn't you sprinkle some fairy dust on me or something?
Fairy dust would definitely help. Unfortunately, all I can ever manage to make is fairy dirt. It, in fact, is not the same thing as dust. I found that out the hard way. Very embarrassing. No, I don't want to talk about it. Now hush and let me concentrate. They decided to try holding hands as she cast the spell this time. She closed her eyes and began to focus harder than she ever had before. She thought about how badly she needed this spell to work. She pictured a world in which she could never again walk hand in hand with Max in the daylight. It was a dark, lonely world, and it was breaking her heart just thinking about it. She then thought about the kind of world they could have together if the spell worked. She saw them walking together down the coast of the beach. There was no one else around, and the tide was rushing in and out on their feet. When they finally reached a pier, they stopped and looked at each other.
I love you, Brynn.
He said to her in the vision. Then they shared a kiss. She exhaled slowly and recited the spell for a second time. "Go upstairs," she said with her eyes still closed. He didn't say anything in response, but she could hear his footsteps as he climbed the stairs. Silence. "Max, say something." She barely choked out, holding back the potential tears that would be there if he was burned again.
Brynn, open your eyes.
He was standing there in the sunlight, beaming a smile bigger than she had seen on him before.
You did it, Brynn. Your spell worked. I knew it would before I even walked upstairs. I could see what you saw as you cast it. It was like we were connected as one mind, one spirit.
All she could do was run up the stairs and give him a hug. It was by far the biggest accomplishment of her life. If only she could share this with the others. They wouldn't think she was such a letdown if they knew that she could do this. "Well, what do you want to do now that you can go outside safely?"
Let's go to lunch.
He said, taking her hand in his. "But you don't eat now. You don't have to go somewhere like that just for my benefit."
I'm sure we can figure something out.
Please like and subscribe for more free audiobook content.